Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Ryan Farley with us. Ryan, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Ryan, you are the co-founder of Lawn Starter, which I think brings lawn care into the 21st century. I'll let you describe it in your own words in a second. But you're also part of Techstars Austin a couple classes ago, and so, a fellow Techstars alum, got to have you on the show, of course. So first, tell us how Lawn Starter actually works. What does a customer get? How does the process work? What is it?
Sure. So, we're a two-sided platform. From the customer point of view, traditionally lawn care has been a very arduous process to order, and both order and manage typically involves several calls to different providers, long games of phone tag, waiting for in-person estimates. So from a customer standpoint, all you have to do is go to our website, type in your address, we automatically price all your services, and you just schedule from there. From there, it gets routed to the optimal lawn care provider for your area. And the platform, actually, one of the big value adds isn't just the ordering, it's the ongoing scheduling, like notifications when there are weather delays, managing seasonal services. So the platform helps with the management, both on the consumer end, but also on the provider end, because it replaces a lot of their paperwork and a lot of their customer service. So it's kind of a symbiotic ecosystem that benefits both the supplier and the supply and the demand side.
No, I mean, it makes total sense to me. When I was away from my home for the last 6 months, I had to get lawn care, and it was difficult. I had to do I had to cut a check from the bank and have it mailed to them. They're emailing me random invoices I can't open up in my programs. I don't actually have visibility into what's happening, and I'm still using it. I mean, it's a broken system, and so I absolutely see the value in what you're doing. Is it fair to say Uberification of lawn care? Is that what's happening here?
Yeah. The analogy breaks down at some point, because I really do think the biggest value add isn't just the ordering, like with Uber. It's the ongoing relationship management is like where we solve most of the pain. So
gotcha.
Yes. Yeah, pretty much.
I gotcha. All right. So, how important has a content strategy has it been to your all's growth? Do you guys use content currently?
Yeah, big time. We have anywhere at any given time between 1 and 3 full-time people working on content.
Oh wow! What kinds of content are those people creating?
Yeah, so we do the general how-to lawn care posts, which are pretty much just kind of going after long tail and just kind of foundational content. Mm-hmm. But the content that we produce to actually promote and get out there is usually not about lawn care. It's generally about things that are kind of tangentially related. For instance, today we've been working on this for about a week. We released a quality of life index using methodology that The Economist developed at a city and state level in the United States, because we found that our target audience tends to like stuff that kind of celebrates their area, and it's a way that we can reach our target audience without them having to be looking for lawn care advice, because the reality is that lawn care is pretty boring and it's never going to really just appear in your newsfeed. So we have to kind of figure out other things that'll reach our target audience.
Yeah, no, I like that insight that you're in a boring industry, but you can write things that are adjacent, still relevant, but not about lawn care specifically, and you still get the right eyeballs from the right people.
Exactly.
Are you guys going after local SEO? So you're writing an article just for Austin, writing another article just for another city? Because I know we had the founder of Apartment List on, and he has the same kind of scenario you do, where it's a marketplace in a lot of different cities, and he said that was working well for him. Or are you guys just going after kind of general SEO for the things you just said?
Yeah, both for SEO and just kind of the viral nature of the content we produce. So we commonly do infographics about what will X city look like in this year, or why everyone's moving, and just kind of aggregate a lot of data that honestly journalists are too lazy to do themselves. So then we feed it to them, and they're happy to write about it, because it's well, thanks for doing all this work for me. that was easy.
No, absolutely. Now, if you were to look at your customer base right now, do you have an idea of what percentage might be because of content? Is this a fractional thing, or is this like a big piece of what you're doing?
Yeah, so it's definitely like a 2-year time horizon, like brand awareness play. I don't have the number in front of me, but we definitely convert, like during the springtime, we convert a lot of people straight from the content.
Gotcha.
And kind of looking at multi-touch attribution, like a good number of our customers have seen our stuff before. So, and as soon as we know that at some point we're going to run out of direct response channels in a city. So, we're starting investing in the brand awareness early right now.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. You mentioned multi-touch, attribution. What's your feelings on that? People are kind of divided. Some people just want to know what the last touch was or the first touch was. Some people like really complicated models that show them every touch that a customer's made with your company. What, as a co-founder, gives you the most insight into what you can turn up the dial on and get more value out of?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the classic marketer's dilemma. I'll give you an example of one that's really important for us. That's like kind of that we've had to demystify a little bit. So I mean, for the longest time when we were just starting up, we were only looking at kind of the last touch attribution or where a customer self-reported that they were from. But as we started talking to a lot of customers, we learned that they would land on our site, check it out, and say, "Oh, this looks interesting." Then they would search lawn starter reviews, and then come from a review site. So that's like a super important one to know, like, what were the multiple touches there. When it comes to kind of like retargeting and stuff, or like did somebody see click a Facebook and a display ad? Like, I'm a little bit less concerned, but like the review thing is huge for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, it would give you misinformation if you thought they were just coming from the review site, as opposed to actually hitting you guys first. Because now you want to know, well, how did you get to us in the first place? And so it just allows you to dig and probably actually figure out how to get more of them. One of the things you also mentioned to me before was that you're careful to make the most of your engineering resources, because you want every feature to give your growth guys the tools they need to grow. What do you mean by that? Unpack that for me a little bit, how you really align engineering with growth.
Sure. So it's easy to I think most engineers are a scarce resource in any startup, and they're almost always the bottleneck. So something we've started thinking about recently is, rather than just say, hey, we want this new funnel feature built, we kind of think okay, how could we build something that we don't need to build on anymore, or that someone that a lot half I think we have 6 growth team members, half of them can code front end decently well, they probably wouldn't trust themselves having full access to our back and whatnot, but they can make websites. So it's how can we build a feature that enables them to make changes down the line, because you always know that you're going to make changes. So for instance, one thing that we did recently was we hacked Instapage together to make it more flexible. So the engineering team did that. So now we can make, for any ads, we can make a landing page however we want with just a drag and drop editor and a few lines of code. And we never have to bother them for ad landing pages ever again.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I like that insight, just always trying to be efficient with engineering resources, because as you said the word bottleneck, everyone who's a founder just is nodding their head right now. Yes, that's the bottleneck. I mean, that's the way I feel too with all the stuff we have going on. We've talked about some kind of new clever stuff. We talked about content marketing, multi-touch attribution. We talked about, Instapage hacks and creating landing pages with efficient engineering resources. But at the end of the day, you guys are in a really old school industry. I mean, it's lawn care. It's been around forever. Do you guys use old school marketing techniques to go with the industry you're in?
Yeah, I mean, we got our first customers from direct mail. And it's expensive.
Wait, what's that?
But yeah, it's I did some direct mail campaigns when I was at Capital One, and like they got super targeted with it. Like it was like they had crazy models built to predict response rate. So you can be data driven with it. We found that like, we've tried everything from just regular mailers to like large booklets and stuff like that, and your response rate just goes up as your cost per mailer goes up. But we found that they were the lowest churn customers, so you could spend more money on a good creative on direct mail and have a better chance of breaking even on it. And then we've also done like kind of setting up booths at the mall and just kind of like talking to people, passing out free water when it's hot, giving out flyers. So we've had some success with that as well.
Yeah, if you had to pick one marketing, kind of thing to keep, would it be old school or new school? If you had to pick one, you could do direct mail, you could do handout water, you can do all that, or you can do digital marketing, landing pages, etc. What do you pick?
New school for sure.
All right, so it still takes the cake. You mentioned some interesting things. You talked in everything about data. It seems like you guys are really a data-driven company. Just now, you mentioned the fact that the retention is higher on the direct mail customers, so you can spend more to acquire them in that channel. That's like, an obvious thing to know and an obvious thing to track, and yet so few companies actually do it. It's rare to find a founder that actually has a clue what's going on, through the funnel and not just at the very top of it. How have you built a data-driven culture, and how important is being data-driven to you guys? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's actually was one of our quarterly initiatives, was to become data-driven, and we had been collecting data in all these different sources, but I'm sure you guys have kind of dealt with this, when you're just trying to get it off the ground, reporting essentially gets pushed down the priority list. So the first thing is to make sure that everything is being recorded one way or another, and you don't really know until you actually try and query that data. But basically, the simple answer is recently. So we use the company, I think it's called 5Train or something like that aggregates your Salesforce, Mixpanel, MySQL, all that kind of stuff into one, so that we can connect the different data sources. And then we have a full-time data analyst as well, and then I have done my best to teach everyone the basics of SQL. So I think it's you just kind of we came to a point at some point where we're like, whoa, crap, there are a lot of things we don't know. This is actually starting to stop our progress. We should invest in answering a lot of these questions. And it's like you said, a lot of people aren't data driven, even though they say they would, and it's amazing the stuff that you can learn. Yeah, it's a huge competitive advantage. You have an angle on the competition that's hard to overstate, because what you think from intuition or gut just doesn't show up in the data sometimes. And if you don't have the data, and you don't have the insights from that data, even more importantly, you're just going to make bad business decisions into the day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've done it. I've done it both ways, with and without data, and I want the data. You guys are in, talking about the Uberification of what you're doing, and, obviously that's too simple. But you are an on-demand marketplace company, and sometimes people are scared of those because it's a two-sided market. It's almost like having two companies at the same time. For you guys, you have the lawn care providers on one side, the customers on the other side. They each have their own needs. They each have their own kind of ecosystem you have to deal with. What growth advice do you have for people watching this that are maybe thinking about starting a marketplace, or they're already in one and they're just realizing how hard it is? Any words of wisdom there? Yeah. A few. So, for one, I think you absolutely have to have an awesome supplier experience. And if you're gonna invest human effort into making sure one party is happy, I think it's the supplier. I think it's the lack of that focus is a big kind of root cause of why HomeJoy failed so badly. And I see it all the time, because at the end of the day, I see so many people go in and they see an old industry and they say, oh, I can make the consumer experience so much better, but they end up essentially taking away from the provider experience, either taking margin or taking time or, causing more hassle. And eventually sure, the supplier might be excited at the idea of more business or whatever you're bringing them, but if they hate you, they're going to do shitty work, and like you're just going to have a leaky bucket. Mm-hmm. So we actually, like, even though, to the press and outsiders, people say, oh, you're making a better consumer experience, like, or like if we had to say what our focus is, one or the other, clearly it's both, but it's definitely on the provider experience, because that ultimately makes the better consumer experience. So that's the first thing I'd say about marketplaces. And the second one is, like, if you're trying to make something on demand, realize it's like you guys at Growth Geeks, like, you just make the connection and then they kind of like take it from there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. For us, it's like there's a huge operational challenge because we stay in the middle. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people underestimate how big and costly that challenge is. We're lucky that when, like, we have good unit economics. Like, when we kind of started this, we didn't really plan for that, but like a lot of marketplaces that kind of manage the operations places don't have good unit economics and never will.
Yeah.
And that's kind of scary.
No, those are great insights. I mean, as somebody who runs a marketplace, I know the wisdom in what you just said, and to somebody that doesn't run a marketplace, they probably missed all that. But they will learn it soon enough that the supply side matters immensely, and unit economics matter immensely, and if you can get that margin up, you got something you can work with. All right, I have a couple final questions that I've been ending every interview with just because they're fun. The first one is, what are you working on as soon as this interview is over? And it could be super awesome or super boring, but what are you actually doing as soon as we're done talking?
Cool. So what am I working? So actually, as soon as this is done, I'm working on a really cool project. There's this company called Data Robot. They just launched, or I don't know if they've launched yet or not, but they basically made this tool that makes, like, any idiot like me who doesn't really understand stats, like, able to do machine learning stuff. And we've used it to, like, build, like, machine learning algorithms to predict customer churn and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that data lake that I mentioned, now that we're stitching all our data together, I'm going to be, like, using Data Robot to make some of these models that, like, they can predict churn, they can predict conversion, they can like, you can basically predict anything and not be a data science expert to do it. So
that's awesome.
I'm pretty excited to be working on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds awesome. All right, last question. What's the best advice you have for any startup that's trying to grow? Yeah, it's an easy one, right?
I'd say, I would say, it's assuming that you have a good product, because you can't polish a turd.
It's true.
Look for where the customer intent is. For example, like, on a review site, we have 5x the conversion of somebody from Google Ads. It's like, and Google Ads, the intent is there too. It's like, that's like every good channel that we found that's worked for us, aside from some of the old school ones. It's just like, where is the intent? And even at your home, like, when we're mailing somebody and the people that respond, the intent is there. Mm-hmm. It's like, where are people already kind of looking for your service-ish? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. I mean, Google built a massive business off intent, and if you can take that insight and put it into some other channels also, I heard somebody say once, if you were, if you had a food truck, where would you park it to make the most money? And, people would be like, oh, here or there, and they have all these answers. Like, no, buy hungry people. Like, that's it. It doesn't matter. Like, where the hungry people are, that's where your food truck would make money. And it doesn't matter what city that's in. It doesn't matter, what street that's on, as long as there's a group of hungry people, because they have the intent to buy food. And the same thing. Just find the intent, find the hungry people, and you'll be able to sell something.
Yeah, I love it.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, this has been a great interview. It's been fun talking about Lawn Starter. I have fun talking about marketplaces. I think I love that you're in such an old school industry, and yet you're doing so much with data and algorithms and models and predictions. It just shows that software is eating the world, and data science is even eating software. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in. You can be on the cutting edge when you're cutting lawns.
I love that. I'm gonna steal that slogan.
I do it. I just came up with it. So again, Ryan, thanks for coming on Growth Hacker TV.
Thanks for having me.